Government spending is causing inflation? We've seen this claim many times, actually, and it's usually coming from politicians. For example, Chris Christie here said that both Trump and Biden spent too much money and caused inflation, so they gotta go. In Canada, Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the opposition, said the same thing about Justin Trudeau and his government. All over the world, many leaders are being accused of spending too much money and therefore causing inflation. But is it true? Does government spending really cause inflation? And how are you going to find out what is true? Well, here at Calling Bullshit, we have a certain way of doing it, and it doesn't involve asking your grandma, as nice as she has been. And it doesn't involve looking at the mainstream media and seeing what they have to say. We don't talk to our favorite politicians, and we certainly don't look at alternative media because no thank you. And we won't be just listening to what my opinion is, because why would you bother to do that? What we're going to do is just try and find what the evidence says by looking at published studies in scientific journals. Okay, well, before we do that, we should understand intuitively what these claims mean. And essentially what people, when they say government spending causes inflation, what they mean is that the government is going in there, spending a lot of money, and that increases general demand in the economy for all goods and services. And when demand increases, your prices for everything is going to increase because the government's competing with everybody for buying all those goods and services. So that causes a price increase, and that is inflation. Now, there is another argument about government spending and inflation, however, and that argument says the opposite. It says that government spending doesn't cause inflation, it actually can reduce inflation. And to understand that argument, you have to think about the ways that government tends to actually spend money. Generally, we find that government spend money on things like healthcare, education, innovation, business development. Well, if you think of all of those things, each of those things makes your population more productive. Healthier people produce more and work more. More educated people have higher productivity. More innovative businesses have higher productivity, etc., etc. So when government spends on those sorts of things, that actually causes an expansion of the supply that your country can produce, the amount of goods and services it can produce, and that actually creates downward pressure on prices because there are more goods and services in the economy and everybody can get them a little bit cheaper. Prices go down. So which one of these theories would hold true? What does the evidence say? Well, let's look at some studies. From 2012, a large study in the Bulletin of Monetary Economics and Banking found this: increases in government spending cause decreases in inflation. A further study from 2005 in the Journal of Monetary Economics, looking at 107 countries, found that amongst the more developed countries of the world, the wealthier half of the world, government spending doesn't cause inflation, but it might in poorer, less developed countries. In 2016, this study in World Scientific Research suggested that government spending does not cause inflation. Here's a book from Richard Vagg, and Richard Vagg studied 50 large economies, checked all their data back to 1970, and what did he find? He said there's no relationship between government spending and inflation. He did another study, what that literally was called Government Debt and Spending Don't Cause Inflation. Well, we can look at academic studies and whatnot, but we can also, the problem with the academic studies sometimes is they're not as up to date as we want. Why? Because those studies go through a large amount of rigor, and that takes time. So what about more recent stuff? Well, then we have to kind of look at studies done through central banks and things like that. And here's a good example, a very up-to-date study from the Bank of Canada, that's the central bank of one of the largest economies in the world, looked at the recent data and said, we find that inflation falls following an increase of government spending. And that fall in inflation lasts about a year and a half. So there you go. There's all sorts of evidence like this, published studies out there. And of course, economists tend to know about this. And that's why an open letter from 17 Nobel Prize winning economists was published in 2024 about this issue. And those 17 Nobel Prize winning economists said the agenda of government spending on productive assets in the long term will increase the economic capacity of the country and will reduce inflationary pressures. So there you go. There's the evidence from it. And so what can we say about this claim that government spending is causing inflation? Well, there's a scientific term for that as well, and that term is bullshit. Thank you for watching the vlog. Please like it and follow it and share it and comment on it and suggest other issues that we can do a little bit of research on and do a show on. Thank you very much.